Welcome to this special post-election analysis. I'm Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. Well, voters sent a strong message via the Republican Express on Election Day. But what was that message? Was it a message of support for Republicans or a repudiation of the failed policies of the Obama administration? Who voted and who didn't? What were the driving issues? Will liberals now retreat from their fictitious war on women? And how do Republicans secure this new majority and pave the way for the GOP to take the White House in 2016? What can we expect from this new congressional majority? We'll take a look at these issues and more as we hear from former Congresswoman Marilyn Musgrave, CNS News' Terry Jeffrey, FRC Action's Josh Duggar, Senator-elect James Lankford of Oklahoma, Representative-elect Barry Loudermilk, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, along with FRC's Kana Gonzalez, David Christensen, and Ken Blackwell. A lot of ground to cover, but to get us started is Susan B. Anthony List, VP of Government Affairs, and former Colorado Congresswoman Marilyn Musgrave. Marilyn, welcome to the program today.
It's a happy day for us, a great day for pro-lifers.
It is very significant when you look at who won last night, especially starting with the Senate races across the country. The life issue won.
The life issue won. You saw Democrats running away from the issue. You saw incumbents like Pryor talking about his faith but not talking about abortion. You saw Mary Landrieu appealing to Catholics but not talking about abortion. You saw Orman in Kansas literally running away from the issue. We didn't have any gaffes with our pro-life candidates, so it was a wonderful night. So encouraging, again, very different than 2 years ago.
Well, I want to drill down on that a little bit because it wasn't just candidates who hold pro-life positions, but it was candidates who embraced pro-life convictions, who actually talked about their stand for the unborn. So this idea that the life issue is a political liability should be put to rest based upon the results of the election.
I couldn't agree more. We mobilized our people on no taxpayer funding of abortion. We mobilized our people on banning late-term abortion. Our candidates talked about the issue. They handled it very well, and the rewards are going to be great as we go forward.
I think that's significant when you talk about they talked about the issue. We actually saw an uptick in the evangelical, which would be the social conservative turnout in the election, coming up in about 20, some of the exit polling shows them at 26% of the total electorate in yesterday's election. They have to be able to connect with the candidates. And so if the candidates don't talk about the issues, that's where that deficit has been.
That's so true. They have to be enthusiastic about getting out there and supporting our pro-life candidates. They also have to know the real record of people like Mary Landrieu. They have to know Pryor's record on abortion. So we got that word out. We mobilized our people, and now they're going to have to deliver to keep those voters engaged.
Mm-hmm. That's the key point, deliver. Because I do believe that in large part, I'm going to talk with Terry Jeffrey about this momentarily, the message coming from voters was not so much an embracing of a GOP vision, but a denouncing of the policies of this administration, which have been pro-abortion, anti-family, anti-faith. But in order to keep that confidence and secure it, the Republicans will have to deliver.
They'll have to deliver. They'll have to set the stage for 2016. And of course, our highest legislative priority is the 20-week ban. The American people are with us. Women are with us in higher numbers even than men. So we hope that this new majority will deliver. We hope we keep this momentum going into 2016.
So let's talk about what are your top three legislative objectives?
Well, number one, again, is the 20-week ban, no taxpayer funding of abortion, transparency in all of this Obamacare, conscience protection. Those are the things that we will be working on. And I think we're going to have some great allies in the United States Senate. It is a new day. It's very encouraging.
And these measures have passed out of the House and have been over in the Senate now for some up to 4 years. So now it's just a question of getting them out of the Senate onto the president's desk.
Yes, and we have a commitment from our new majority leader that he's going to bring this to a vote in the United States Senate. We have commitments from the seats that were flipped. We have commitments from those people that won last night. So we're in there for the long haul. We want to see this signed into law. We want to see lives saved.
Congresswoman, let me ask you one final question on this. War on women that we've heard over and over. In fact, Republicans would almost run scared when that would be brought up. It appears that I would think the liberals would be retreating from that fictitious war on women after last night's results.
Well, I'm from Colorado. Boy, is there a better example anywhere than Colorado, where Mark Udall thought that abortion was his ticket to ride, going after Cory Gardner in that race. And Udall was ahead early on. It tightened up a little bit, but it was supposed to be too close to call. Cory Gardner won handily. Mark Udall's war on women with abortion as the cornerstone of that argument failed.
Going forward, a lot of folks turned out in the elections, they got involved, they voted, but really the work just begins. The citizens, the pro-lifers across the country are going to have to stay engaged.
That is so true. I think our elected officials, the new majority, particularly in the Senate, needs to know the expectations of the people around this country. We, social conservatives, need to send a strong message that we expect late-term abortion to be banned. We say no taxpayer dollars for abortions. So the work has begun. They're our elected officials. They need to hear from us. The grassroots gave these guys their victories, and we need to stay engaged.
How, and I'm asking you as a former member of Congress who was responsive to your constituents, how best can people communicate these issues, this desire for them to move forward? How can they best communicate that?
There are many ways possible to do it now. Emails, phone calls, show up at meetings when your congressman is in town. Let your voice be heard. Support organizations that give your message to these people, that keep them accountable. Believe me, elected officials do respond to their constituents. Let them know what your expectations are and make them live up to it.
Bottom line is stay engaged.
Absolutely.
Marilyn, thanks so much for being with us.
It's great to be with you.
And
thanks for all you do.
congratulations to
Congratulations to you too.
SBA. All right,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks. Good to see you again. Well, this election broke in the final days and even hours for Republican candidates in many of these key Senate races. So was this election an endorsement of the Republicans, or was it a repudiation of the failed policies of Barack Obama? Joining me now is CNS News Editor-in-Chief Terry Jeffrey. Terry, welcome.
Good to see you, Tony. Thanks
Good to
for
see
having
you.
me.
You're smiling.
Yeah, I am.
Let me start with that question. Was last night's, what I would say, a historic shift? Was it an embracing of the GOP or more of a repudiation of Barack Obama's policies?
I think it was more a repudiation of Barack Obama's policies. You even saw something like 33% of the people who went out and voted for Republican members of the House of Representatives don't like the Republican leadership in Congress. And it is an historical trend that in the second term of a two-term president in the midterm elections, it is a referendum on him. If he's unpopular,
Right,
like George Bush was in 2006, like Obama is now, you see people go out and vote.
But this was a significant shift in that it really broke at the last minute. I mean, given where this administration has been, I mean, this is not new that they've got bad policy.
Yeah.
Of course, we had ISIS in the Middle East. We had the Ebola. We've got the southern border. All of these issues. You would have thought that the Republicans could have locked this up weeks ago.
I think so. If you look at the Ed Gillespie race in Virginia, I think it's interesting because Gillespie really didn't project himself to the public as standing for any particular issues. It's almost like he wasn't there. He simply was the Republican on the ballot, yet he almost won. If you look at the exit polls, Tony, what I find most striking about them is that the electorate yesterday was culturally conservative. For example, they ask in the exit polls how often someone goes to church. There are people who never go to church. That a super majority of them vote for Democrats. Once someone walks into a church, they become more likely to vote for a Republican. You look at the more often someone went to church, the more likely they voted for a Republican. If you're married and you have kids, you voted for a Republican. If you go to work all the time, if you're a full-time worker, you vote for a Republican. If you believe in traditional marriage, you vote for a Republican. So I think what the Republicans need to remember, even though there were, and by the way, all of the new senators who were elected, these are pro-life people who presented themselves as cultural conservatives to their voters. The Republicans need to remember that's who elected them.
See, that I think is critical, because taking those demographics even further, you look at those under 29, only 12%, they only made up 12% of the electorate, and of course they broke primarily for the Democrats. Where can the Republicans go to expand their voting population? You've got to look at who votes for them.
Well, that's exactly true. I think there are some troubling long-term trends in the demographics of the country. For example, the last 5 years, according to the CDC, 40% of the babies born in America were born to unmarried mothers.
Right.
So that trend, actually, if you're a Democrat, you want broken families politically.
Right.
I mean, it works for you. If you want to preserve American liberty, you can't have that. You need to preserve the traditional family, not just for moral reasons, but because that is the fabric of our society.
So what makes it work?
It makes it work. So we see that long-term trend. It's troubling. Republican politicians, I think, have a duty as statesmen and stateswomen to fight that on the grassroots level, not just because it works politically, but because we need it as a country.
Let's take, for instance, let's look at because we hear a lot about this, about, well, we've got to get the millennial vote, those under
Right.
29. There's two problems with that, I think, is that they do not vote in the percentages that those over 55 and others vote in. So they just don't make up that large portion of the electorate. Plus, they're not locked into the views that they hold today.
Exactly. I think younger people have a tendency when they reach a certain age, which is about the same time they're being allowed to vote, to question the beliefs that they're brought up with, to question the things their parents taught them. That's a thing that you see human beings going through all the time. As they grow older, they get married, they get a job, they have responsibilities,
And
they become more conservative.
their parents become so much smarter when they have to face the same issues.
Well, exactly. And there's also a thing about leadership. People do understand the truth. When Ronald Reagan, who was an older man running for president, went out and spoke the truth, he inspired young people. I think politicians that have courage, that speak the truth, that's what being charismatic is. So this is another duty of these folks elected yesterday: lead young people by fighting for the truth.
Okay, let's start right there. What did the Republicans do from this point forward to solidify this majority they've been given and pave the way for the GOP to the White House in 2016?
Okay, I'll tell you one thing they shouldn't do. In September, before they left to run for the election, they passed a CR that they purposefully determined would expire on December 11th, meaning they empowered the lame duck Congress to come back and fund the government. So all these people who were thrown out of office yesterday or retired, they're going to decide on what is spent and what is not spent. The new guys coming in aren't going to get an opportunity that day. The Republican leadership should not make a deal with Harry Reid and Barack Obama to permanently fund Obamacare through the rest of next year. They shouldn't fund Planned Parenthood. They shouldn't fund anything that's immoral, quite frankly. They should do a small thing that brings them past the 1st of January so the new guys come in. Let's have a real national battle over those issues.
What are the other policy priorities that the Republicans should advance going forward?
Well, I think a big one remains the freedom of religion. We won the Hobby Lobby case, but it's a very narrowly defined decision, and there are still a great many other cases out there. For example, Wheaton College. They're trying to force Wheaton College to sign this form that directs their insurance provider to provide abortion-inducing drugs. That is an outrageous attack on religious liberty. If the Republicans explain it, people will understand it. They need to fight that. And quite frankly, I'd say for a congressman to come in having said he was a pro-lifer or believed in freedom of religion, and the first thing he does is vote for a bill that gives Barack Obama the ability to attack your free exercise rights, is immoral. So they can't do it. So they need to stand up and fight for that.
What you're laying out is an aggressive path forward where they have to draw a clear contrast between them and the current administration. Is that what you believe voters are looking for?
Yes. And there's a lot of places in the country where not a lot of people went out to vote. And yesterday that helped Republicans because people were coming out to express their dismay with the established order and with President Barack Obama. The Republicans, to inspire their electorate in 2016, need to tell people that we are going to fight for you and what you believe in.
That would be counter to some expectations.
Yes, it would. Well, the problem is, I will say when you had this great election in 2010, the Tea Party got the Republicans a majority in the House. The first thing they did, Tony, was turn around and pass a CR that fully implemented Obamacare.
Right.
And I have to
funded Planned Parenthood and abortions in D.C.
Yes. And faster than almost any group of congressmen I've seen come to Washington, you saw these guys elected in 2010 become part of the Washington establishment. They can't, and that it backfired on the Republicans in 2012. These folks need to come in and fight for what the people who elected them believe in. They have to stand up for the things. Everybody can go look on their websites today. These guys said they were for marriage. They said they were pro-life. They said they were for repealing Obamacare. Now the people who went out and voted for them expected them to act like they really believe what they said.
So for voters, this yesterday was not the end, it was just the beginning.
Yes, sir.
All right. Terry Jeffrey, thanks so much for being with us. As always, appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
All right. Well, FRC Action PAC enjoyed an 86% success rate in the elections with 129 endorsed candidates winning their races. In most of these key races, we saw the candidates who ran as conservatives, well, they won pretty handedly. I want to show you one of the ads that we ran in North Carolina in particular in one of the Senate races there. Watch this ad from FRC's PAC.
Don't worry, it's painless. It's a new procedure performed through Obamacare, supported by Kay Hagan. Your tax dollars are removed, and some go to pay for abortions. And yep, every tax-paying American gets this operation. Want to opt out because of religious convictions? Sorry, guess you'll have to pray for forgiveness. You can thank Kay Hagan for that one. I'll see you real soon.
Faith Family Freedom Fund is
Hey, how you
responsible
doing?
for the content of this advertising.
Well, that was one of the states in which we were successful with Tom Tillis edging out a victory there. And by the way, he was one of the candidates that in the end, I think he abandoned the advice of some of the Washington-based consultants and ran as a conservative, actually stepping out front as the House Speaker there in North Carolina, aggressively supporting the state's marriage amendment, which came under attack through the courts. Another one of those races was in Arkansas with Tom Cotton. And joining me now from Arkansas is FRC Action's Executive Director, Josh Duggar. Josh, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks, Tony. It's an exciting day here in Arkansas and across America.
Well, you were there last night for the victory party with Tom Cotton. What was kind of the sense in the room there last night?
Well, it was pretty awesome, Tony, to be standing beside Tom and Anna, his wife, along with my wife, Anna, and we were there, when he got a call from the president. I said, the president of what? He said, the president of the United States. And I think it's a signal that the president understands now that instead of this stuff piling up on Harry Reid's desk, it's coming to him. And now he's going to be faced with the fact that his own policies are going to be on the table, and he's going to have to start realizing that he's going to have to either work with Congress or he's going to have to be an obstructionist. And I hope we're going to see a shift, but we're just going to have to wait and see.
All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the other races that FRC Action PAC was involved in across the country. Give us some of the other races where we saw success.
Well, Tony, it's just hard to even start mentioning by name, but I think you have to look at some of these key Senate contests where we were in strong. I mean, Arkansas was one, but you've got Oklahoma. We, of course, were out in Kansas with Pat Roberts. You look at, Louisiana, even where you had, I think conservatives had a loud and clear voice in saying, look, we reject Mary Landrieu. We don't believe that she is our candidate. You scoot over to Georgia, where you had a clear and decisive victory there for David Perdue, a solid pro-life candidate. I think you have to look at as well Tennessee with Amendment 1. Voters came out there, and historically amendments, if they don't understand the amendment, they typically vote against it. And so what we had was the opportunity to go in there. We were there 3 times in the last few months, standing with Tennesseans, It passed just narrowly. I think it was 52% of the vote, but it was a decisive victory. You look at North Carolina with Tom Tillis, as you just mentioned, Tony, where we had that ad up there all over the airwaves. I talked to people who saw the ad. It encouraged them, and it really laid out the clear case that when you stand with Kay Hagan, you're standing with President Obama. And I think voters are all over the place are saying, just like they did in Colorado with Cory Gardner, they're saying we cannot stand the Obama agenda and those who are standing up with him. And so these victories are pretty consistent. And I think what you're seeing is the fact that people are fed up and they're saying enough is enough. But now the work is on us to go and continue to stand with these and to make sure they're going to go out to work for you, the American people.
Let me, before we get on to any policy issues, let me talk a little bit about these candidates, because some folks would wonder, what does it take to be an FRC Action PAC endorsed candidate? What does it take for FRC Action to get behind a particular candidate? Is it a high threshold? Do we expect a certain amount out of these candidates?
We expect a lot out of these candidates. I'll tell you, Tony, it's not just a pat on the back and a little phone call or something like that. It is a vetting process, and we look into their records. We do research on our own. And then we have a sit-down interview with them. We discuss these issues in detail, and then we go around and we do sort of a process of making certain that not just their words are there, but that their actions will back that up. And what we've had, in the past is the opportunity to go and sit down with so many of these, and we find out that they are not standing up. And so what we do is we do a rigorous background check, and it's not real easy, but we make it something that we know these candidates, when we get through, are going to stand up for what's right.
Now, in the last 2 weeks coming up to the election, you were out on a Faith, Family, Freedom bus tour, hitting about 7 of the key states. What were the issues that you heard people talking about as we moved toward yesterday?
Well, Tony, this notion of the war on women, I think that was just put to rest yesterday. I mean, you look at Colorado, that was the forefront issue there. And even here in Arkansas with Senator Pryor, you continue to hear that narrative. And I think people are just sick and tired of hearing this, because really the truth is we are the ones standing up for women. We look at Amendment 1. When you look at what's going on in Congress right now with the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, when you look at the 20-week pain bans that are passing in state chambers around this nation, we are the party standing up for women. We are the ones who are standing up for women. And I think that's what we have to continue to message. And if you look at, consistently, most of these were Republican victories where they were standing with us. You have to realize that there is a clear contrast between those who are standing up for what's right and those who aren't. And another issue that's not dead, and this is something we had listed on the side of our bus, is marriage. And the fact that strong economies are built on strong families, and strong families are built on strong marriages. And when you have every child deserves a mother and father, and when you're able to have those issues in the forefront, people agree with them. In North Carolina, that was one where it was up there. And I think people realized that Tom Tillis was going to go to fight for North Carolina values, and one of the top of those was marriage.
All right, Josh Duggar, thanks so much. Look forward to you getting back to town.
Looking forward to it, Tony.
All right, that's Josh Duggar, Executive Director of FRC Action. All right, we're going to be looking at more of the changes in the House and Senate still to come. We have Representative-elect Barry Loudermilk from Georgia will be joining us, as well as Senator-elect from Oklahoma, James Lankford. But first, I want to take a little look at the state issues. The GOP gubernatorial races gained ground in legislatures across the country, and was just mentioned by Josh. Amendment 1 in Tennessee, a pro-life measure passed. There were other ballot initiatives. Joining us now with an in-depth analysis, I'll get that out here in just a moment, on major wins on the state level is Kana Gonzalez. Kana, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you.
All right, let's start with some of these issues. What was overall the news from the state level?
Well, it's very interesting watching the states as opposed to the national elections, because national results come in very quickly and state results come in very slowly. So the good news was slow and unfolding, but slow but sure, and it was really exciting to see. Like you said, there were several ballot initiatives that we were looking at in about 8 states on a variety of issues. And as you said, the pro-life ballot initiative in Tennessee passed through. That's a 10 or 12-year battle that we've been fighting.
And it should be noted that in that particular case, the opponent spent $4 million to try to defeat it. That's Planned Parenthood, the other pro-abortion organizations, to the $1 million that proponents of Amendment 1 spent.
That's exactly right. In Florida and in a handful of other states, judicial activists, judges from the bench, have legislated that there is a state constitutional right to abortion, and that really prohibits the legislatures from passing the kind of pro-life laws we want to see.
What this did was simply put it back into the hands of the legislators.
Put it right back into the hands of the legislators as their elected representatives of the people.
Well, that's certainly good news for those in Tennessee. We also had state legislatures actually move to the Republican column.
We actually did. And again, the results are not all in, and so I'm not here with bottom line numbers.
Yeah.
But we are seeing great progress. One of the measures of success is that, as you know, there was a wave election of Republicans at the state level in 2010, and a raft of pro-life laws were passed. Hundreds of pro-life laws were passed in the 4 years since then. They managed to guard those gains, and it looks like they are either going to guard those gains or maybe even in some cases build on them, and so that's very exciting.
Well, that goes back then to a conversation I had with Marilyn Musgrave just a few moments ago, when she talked about yesterday on the federal level, especially we focused on the Senate races, they were all pro-life candidates who were elected to the United States Senate. This would suggest that when you see the states that have passed over 200 pro-life pieces of legislation in the last 4 years, that instead of those policies being denounced by the public, they were actually embraced because they put them back in office.
Yes, and there were a few key races that really, I think, are going to signal what's coming in the states next year and that I'm very excited about. As you know, so far we've picked up 4 governorships, and 3 of those were in deep blue states in, forgive me, I want to make sure I get this right, in Illinois, in Maryland, and in
I think we got in Maine, one of those states.
Maine was Maine stayed Maryland, Massachusetts,
That's
of all
right,
places. So you have these deep blue states where you have Republican governors not only winning but breaking the back of single party rule, and that's really exciting to see what will happen. Those Republican governors that are winning will be in a position to encourage good laws and to stop bad laws for the first time in those states.
So what does this suggest then for pro-family policies at the state level going forward now?
Oh, we're very excited about the future. I don't know what the prognostication was at the federal level, but I was not looking for this kind of an election, and I'm very excited to see what we're going to be able to pass next year. As you know, at FRC, we have developed a raft of pro-life, pro-family, and religious liberty laws, which we are working with our state allies to pass next year. And now the opportunities have grown tremendously. So we're looking forward to what next year will bring.
Any other surprises that we saw last night at the state level?
I think that covers it for me.
All right, Kana, thanks so much for being with us. As always, appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
And go to work now, okay? All right, well, not only did the Senate come under Republican control, but the Senate, by a slim majority now, will have control of the Senate. But what does that mean? Can we expect the Senate to now pass some of the bills that were supported by the House and sent over to the Senate in the last 4 years? Joining me now is a former Oklahoma representative and now Senator-elect James Lankford. James, welcome to this special program. We're having trouble connecting him. We'll get him in just a moment. All right, James, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you very much.
Let's talk about this, Senator. Congratulations in your election. What can we now expect out of this new Senate majority made up of Republicans?
Right, there's a big shift that happens when you go from being the minority in the Senate to being the majority, to actually trying to say, how do we bring pieces of legislation and try to actually fix problems rather than just block? So there's a couple things. One is we've got to actually block the things that President Obama is pushing, but the other one is to actually put forward things that we would agree with. There's 387 bills we passed in the House of Representatives that the Senate has never even debated, much less voted on, never even debated those things. So let's move a lot of those things over. They deal with regulatory reform, they deal with energy, they deal with Obamacare, just on and on and on, the issues that we've dealt with there. So let's move those to the Senate, let's get the debate, let's actually set some things in the President's desk and move forward on an agenda.
Many of those pieces of legislation you were a part of spearheading in the House. You'll now have a chance to do that in the Senate. Do you think that you'll be able to muster the support needed in the Senate to advance these and place these onto the president's desk?
I do, and I think there's some key areas. For instance, in the House, we passed not only Obamacare full repeal, but we've also passed things like the 40-hour work week. Americans think we already have a 40-hour work week, but Obamacare took that away. It's now a 30-hour work week. So we need to move that back to 40-hour. That affects a lot of folks that are in poverty and low entry-level jobs. To be able to allow them to be able to get to a 40-hour work week again is a huge help for their family. Just opening up freedom of choice again for people to be able to pick health insurance plans, to not have to play Mother May I with Washington, D.C. for a health insurance plan, to say you can purchase any health insurance policy that's legal in your state. That's a huge dynamic. So while I think it's important that we lay out things like repealing Obamacare entirely, I think we also lay out things that the Senate should move, and the president will have a very difficult time vetoing, because the American people, quite frankly, already wish that they had it now.
So, Senator Lankford, what is top on your priority list as you move over to the Senate?
Well, budget for me is still a huge area. The people have started to step back and say, well, our deficit is only $480 billion now, so we're doing much better in deficit. We still have $480 billion in deficit. That's a big deal. I come from a biblical worldview in the way that I address issues. When I look at Nehemiah and how he handled things when he stepped into Jerusalem, it was that the people were in disgrace and the wall was broken down. But the two things that he focused in on was the infrastructure side of things and the debt. Half of the book of Nehemiah is just getting the people out of debt, and so they can actually take on the other things. We can't handle national defense right now. We can't handle a lot of things that we need to do and that need to be driven by states because we have so much debt. So that should remain a big focus for us to get ourselves out of debt. We are proof that our nation really is a slave to the lender.
Speaking of that biblical worldview, we've seen under this administration increased hostility toward religious expression, in particular Christianity. Is that going to be an issue that you help address, allowing people to actually exercise religious freedom and live their life according to their faith?
Absolutely. In fact, it's interesting. Last night, there were three things that I addressed where I said we've lost freedom in this country, and we've got to be able to take those back. Number one was the debt. Number two is the federal government thinks that they're everyone's dad. We're not encouraging dads to actually be dads and lead to families again. And the third aspect was religious liberty. People that have faith should be free to be able to live their faith in the workplace, at home, wherever they are. People that don't have faith, they choose not to have faith. That's their free choice as an American. But for those of us that do have faith, we should be able to live that out. So whether you're a chaplain in the military, whether you're a small business or a large business and choose to live and practice your business by biblical practices, or whether you're just an individual trying to make decisions about how to be able to handle your business and how you're going to be able to serve things and do it by biblical practices, that is your free choice as an American, and we've got to find ways to be able to protect that.
Well, James, again, congratulations on your election to the United States Senate. Obviously, we look forward to continuing to work with you now on the other side of the Capitol.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I encourage people to pray as much as we complain. We're all pretty frustrated with what's happening in government. Let's lean in, let's pray it through, and let's deal with this.
All right. James Lankford, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned, not only did the Senate come under Republican control, but the Republicans expanded their control of the House in a pretty significant margin. And one of those new solidly conservative members is Barry Loudermilk. He will be representing the 11th Congressional District of Georgia, and he's one of those solid candidates that was out early, embracing the entire conservative platform unapologetically, and he won a pretty significant race there in the state of Georgia, and he joins us. I believe. Do we have Congressman Loudermilk? All right, joining us now is Congressman-elect Barry Loudermilk. Barry, welcome to this special program. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. It really is.
Well, let's talk about this now. You're going to be coming. I know you've already been to Washington to get a handle on some things. Next time you're going to be in the very near future you're going to take the oath of office as the new congressman there from Georgia. What's on the top of your agenda as you come to Washington?
Well, there's just so many things that we need to address. It's difficult getting your hands around everything, but One of the things that I've addressed in my business and when I was in the military is if you have a problem, you don't address the symptom of the problem. You have to get to the root of the problem. And that's one of the things that we hope to do is to get to the root of all these problems. I know the debt is one of the things that we have to address. And, when you look at this overwhelming debt, it's going to threaten not only our national security, but individual liberty. And we have to get to what the root of the problem is. And really, I believe the root of the problem is human nature in that we have to force Congress to live within its means. So that's one of the things that I think we need to look at. But the thing that's scaring me the most right now is the overreach of the executive branch. How are we going to reel them back in to stand within their constitutional realm and operate within that constitutional realm? And I know Congress is given the power to hold the other branches in check. But what tools are we going to use to get that into place? Well, one that we have that we haven't, but we should have is the budget. And so there's a lot of issues that we're facing that is going to be really in our first few months. There is where should our priorities be to address the numerous issues from the loss of our personal rights, the attacks on religious liberties, and our nation quickly running itself into bankruptcy.
Congressman, you ran as a solid conservative. I mean, you ran as who you are. You're a conservative. You were attacked by some within the Republican ranks for being too conservative, but you won this race. What were you hearing out there from voters as you were out there campaigning, not being silent on these issues, but being very vocal on the core values issues of life, of marriage, of family, of religious liberty?
Well, one of the things that we decided to do early on is I told our campaign team, we don't have to tell Americans how bad the country is messed up. They know it. They live it. They're paying it in their taxes. They're losing their liberties every day. They know that we're in dire straits in this nation. What we have to do is go and present to them the idea that there are solutions, that we can get ourselves out of this mess we're in. So we focused upon solutions. And we took those conservative principles and we applied them to practical solutions. One of the things that I addressed our campaign team is, a lot of times conservatives, we operate in the mental sphere. We have all the facts and the figures and the ideas, but many voters, they vote with their heart, and we have to connect those two. And so we took a lot of issues that seemed to be complex, and we made them personal to each and individual person of how big government is affecting them individually in their lives, how overregulation is costing them at the supermarket, when they go to buy a home, that nearly 50% of the cost of a new home is because of government regulation. And so what we did was we took these conservative values that are no more than the values of our founding fathers, and we applied them to each individual person individually. And so instead of just running attack ads about how bad my opponent is, we focused upon solutions, practical things that we can do, and it's just based on the things that our founding fathers believed and the ideas they had. And I think that was the reason that we were so successful.
One final question for you, Barry, is you've had, I know, some conversations with some of your soon-to-be colleagues. What is the sense among your colleagues? Is there a anticipation of bringing significant change to Washington, even challenging the Republicans as well as the Democrats?
Well, there is, and as I was just kind of taking a tally last night, that the number of conservatives, those that not only say they're conservative but have had the actions and the courage to stand up for conservative principles, that number is growing, and it will be a voice in this Congress. But I think we do have to come to the table with solutions, and we have to be dedicated to that. We have to continue to push forward and not back up. This is a great opportunity. We've been given a tremendous opportunity, but we're going to have to move quickly. We need to govern to turn this nation around, not just govern to increase our majority, but we need to take up the ball and move it down the field. This is our opportunity. And so we're going to have to work together with the others, but I know that our colleagues are feeling very confident that we will be able to do some things in this Congress.
All right. Congressman-elect Barry Loudermilk, thanks so much for being with us. And again, congratulations.
All right. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, folks, you're going to be a key part of that. I mean, we did not see all these efforts put into this election so that Republicans could come to Washington to babysit America's demise. This, as Barry alluded to and others, we've got a short window, I believe, to turn this nation around. And it was a good start yesterday. And thank you to all of those of you who were involved in these elections and went out and voted and got engaged. But the work just begins when we bring them to Washington, D.C. A little bit earlier today, I caught up with Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana, who is the majority whip, and interviewed him on what is to come from his perspective in the new Congress beginning at the first of the year. Here's that interview. Well, as we just heard, it was not only the Senate that came under Republican control, but the House actually expanded its Republican majority. And so what does that really mean? What is that? How does that set the stage going forward? Joining me now to talk about that is Steve Scalise, the majority whip in the House from the 1st Congressional District of Louisiana. He joins us by phone. Congressman Scalise, first, congratulations on your re-election last night. Pretty significant win for you.
Thanks a lot, Tony. 78% of the vote. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to represent Southeast Louisiana in Congress again for another 2 years. Yeah, I'm really excited about the mandate that was sent by the voters across the country. And look, when Barack Obama said that the vote was going to be a referendum on his agenda, I think the voters took that to heart, and they don't like the agenda, and they came out strongly and rejected the president's agenda last night.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I agree with you. I think the president himself said, my policies are on the ballot, and I think people responded overwhelmingly to those policies, those failed policies, both on the foreign and the domestic front. So was this, in your opinion, more about the president's failed policies than necessarily what the Republicans were proposing?
It was more about the president's failed policies, and frankly, the people that have been voting with the president. And in our state here in Louisiana, Mary Landrieu was on the ballot, and she couldn't run away from the president's policies because she's voted with him 97% of the time, and she only got 41% of the vote, which is it's an embarrassing number for her. But again, it's the voters saying we've had enough with this radical liberal agenda. We want to get the country back to that center-right nation that we've always been. And frankly, our candidates were very strong at making the case that conservative policies are better for people. And so while the details might not have been that clear, the broad picture of the failed agenda of Barack Obama and the liberals in Congress versus a conservative approach, and the conservative approach won out. Now it's time to go and govern and pass good conservative policy through both the House and the Senate and get them on Barack Obama's desk. And let's see if he's willing to work with us to get the country moving again.
Congressman Scalise, I want to ask you about that, because now you're absolutely right. The House has passed some 350 or so pieces of legislation that have been sitting on Harry Reid's desk over the last 4 years. That's no longer going to be an issue. I mean, the Republicans now, with control of the Senate, should be able to take some of this common sense legislation that the House has passed. Will we see the House pushing forward once again with the legislation, especially when it comes to Obamacare, when it comes to religious liberties? Will we see the House pick it up and push those things again, expecting the Senate to act on them?
Yeah, Tony, I'd like to see us go back to some of those bills that we've passed, and many of them have bipartisan support, but they're good conservative policies that were sent over to the Senate, and Harry Reid would deep six them, not because they wouldn't pass the Senate, I think primarily because they would pass the Senate, and Barack Obama didn't want those bills on his desk. And so I want us to go back and let's pass those bills not only through the House now, but we'll have a Republican Senate that'll actually take those bills up. And let's have those debates on the Senate floor. And hopefully a lot of those good conservative policies will pass to the president's desk, and it'll be good policies that people across the country will be happy seeing us move a positive agenda. And now Barack Obama is going to be in a position where he's got to make decisions. He can't just hide behind the Senate and bash Congress all day and say they're a do-nothing Congress. We're going to be doing some things. It might not be the kind of things he wants, but it's the kind of things that the voters across the country want.
One final question for you, Congressman Scalise. Specific piece of legislation. What happens to Obamacare? Will there be a push to repeal Obamacare?
Well, there's always been a desire to repeal Obamacare, and we're not going to give up that fight. And I think in the meantime, you look at things that we can continue to do that would undermine the law even further, including some of the court cases that are moving through the courts that'll help undermine it, which I'll give you an example. The case about the federal government subsidizing federal exchanges. That's going to be before the U.S. Supreme Court. I hope they throw that out and block the federal government from going and subsidizing these federal exchanges, which a majority of states said we don't want the state exchange, and there's no mechanism for the federal government to do what they've been doing. That helps undermine the law. So things that are actually focused on getting the economy moving and getting to the place where we can repeal Obamacare and setting the stage for 2016 too, because even if this president doesn't work with us, if he vetoes good bills that people across the country care about, it's going to make it even clearer that it's not a do-nothing Congress. It's a liberal president that's out of touch with the country, and whether it's Hillary Clinton or Elizabeth Warren or whatever kind of liberal they're going to put up, it'll set a better contrast for 2016 where we're going to have really good candidates running on the Republican side, but people will realize more what's at stake in the presidential race. That's how we really get the country back on track in the end.
I agree with you 100%. The work begins with, with the Republicans. I think even in this lame duck session of Congress, making very clear that they heard voters in yesterday's election. Again, Steve, congratulations on your reelection, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Tony, and I look forward to working with you in the new Congress as we focus on getting the country moving again. So thanks for what you do.
All right, very good. Congressman Steve Scalise of the 1st Congressional District of Louisiana. Well, I do believe this election can have a very positive impact upon legislation like the sanctity of life, advancing protections for religious freedom, and making sure that the presidential and judicial nominees, that the presidential nominations that he makes do not turn into political activists. But that's going to require your involvement and your engagement. Joining me now with a perspective of the impact this will have on the Hill and how we turn it into a very positive experience is David Christensen, the Vice President of Government Affairs. David, welcome.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.
All right, initial reactions to last night's election.
Well, I think it's very positive. There were 98, 100% members of Congress in the House that were 100% on our scorecard that are returning. The overall numbers, everybody's talking about the overall numbers increasing by about 10 votes. But we actually probably increased the pro-life majority in the House by about at least 10 members, and that's significant. In the Senate, there were 10 senators who were 100%. 5 of them were running for re-election, all won. And we've seen now a Senate majority that's going to be controlled by Republicans. People, like you said, need to be engaged. And they need to be engaged this fall. We have a lame duck session. Congress is coming back with none of these new good members. They're going to be passing nominations, replace Eric Holder. They're going to be passing more judicial nominees. Harry Reid is not going to lay down and go to sleep. So Americans need to weigh in. Conservatives need to weigh in. We need to make sure that the spending bills protect pro-life riders. In this fall, it funds the federal government, the Hyde Amendment, preventing government funding of abortion, conscience protections that are existing law. We need to protect those this fall. We need people, conservatives watching, to weigh in with their members now. Then going into 2015. I know other speakers earlier talked about the importance of pro-life bills and religious liberty bills. There's a number of bills that I think we can pass in the Senate. We need to force President Obama to veto the Unborn Pain Capable Child Protection Act. You know, President Clinton vetoed a number of bills and then compromised. President Obama hasn't had to veto anything. Conscience protections, religious liberty protections that were mentioned. We need the Senate then next year, with the support of the American people, to pass these and force the president to say, no, I'm still not going to compromise after this drubbing in the election. And frankly, that sets up 2016.
Let's start first. You mentioned the lame duck session of Congress. What is the greatest threat going into this lame duck session now that we know that the Democrats have lost control? This could be the president's last chance to push more of his radical agenda through.
Well, I think the long-term ability of the president to shape America through the courts and through bad nominations is absolutely the greatest threat coming into this lame duck. Eric Holder has been a terrible attorney general, and he's going to replace that seat. We have more nominees, judges that'll be put up to the bench. And, you know, we can't have the Republicans just say, well, we're just going to let this slide. We're just going to wait till next year. Once these guys get nominated, they get put on the bench, they're there for life.
Right.
And we need to stop that.
What are the greatest opportunities going into this new Congress with Republicans controlling both the House and the Senate?
One of the greatest opportunities is repealing Obamacare through a budget process, getting rid of abortion funding, and protecting conscience rights. Those are realistic, very, I wouldn't say modest, they're realistic. They're not crazy schemes. These are real opportunities that Americans can get behind. Force Democrats to go along with those. A lot of the Democrats, they do want to go to that. The left wing of the Democratic Party hates it, but they should vote for those. We need members on record and hold them accountable going into the next round of elections.
Let me go back to the elections here for just
Yes.
a moment. We talked about the policies in the lame duck session. We talked about what we can anticipate in the upcoming session of Congress. But let's talk about those who were successful. One of the ways in which we recognize those members on the
Right.
Hill that are solid on our issues,
Right.
we call them true blue. Recognize them for their 100% voting record on family issues. How did the true blue members do in their re-elections?
They did quite well. There were 98, there were over 100 congressmen from this session that were 100% on our scorecard, ranging from votes related to religious liberty, pro-life. There were some marijuana votes. They voted solid, and most of them all are returning. And we know from FRC Action that a number of the new members are going to be really good on our issues as well. In the Senate, we have we have about 10 100% senators. 5 of those will be returning, the rest were retired. There's a number of senators who are in the 80 to 90% range. So they vote with us on the issues, and we need to continue to lean on them. And when people do take tough votes and vote the right way for family, for life, then we acknowledge them and we want to recognize them. And that's something that we do because people watching this webcast need to know that.
And again, the evidence suggests that those that stand true on those core value issues of faith, family, and freedom, it's not a liability, but rather it's an asset when they go before voters.
Yes, and one of the easiest ways for members who don't want to have a vote on that is just not to get a vote. Like if they want to hide from the life issue, they don't get a vote. We need those votes. We need to support candidates to be pro-life. This is probably the most pro-life House of Representatives ever. And that's saying something. And in the Senate now, we have 52 known Senate Republicans. We have 44 solid pro-life votes. We have a number of members. We did a lot of work on the HHS mandate and the Hobby Lobby case, equipping members of Congress to speak intelligently about these issues, protecting religious liberty. We're going to continue to provide that kind of information so that they can stand firm on these issues, not shy from them. When they speak intelligently about these issues and tell it like it is, Americans don't turn around and throw them out. They support them, and we need to help them.
All right. Well, David Christensen, you have some work cut out for you.
Looking forward to it.
All right, David. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. Finally, we're going to answer the question that I know many of you have been waiting for. What impact will last night's election have on 2016? What do Republicans need to do now that they're in the majority to pave the way to the White House in the 2016 election? Joining me now with the answer to this very question is senior fellow here at FRC and the former mayor of Cincinnati and Secretary of State for the state of Ohio, Ken Blackwell. Ken, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tony.
All right, what's the answer to that? What do Republicans need to do to parlay this victory last night into a path to the White House?
They need to remember who brought them to the party. And that's an old saying in politics, but it is the truth. Every candidate in the Senate that won last night, with probably the exception of one, ran as a full spectrum conservative on social issues, on economic and national security issues. Now is not a time to cut and run because that will just demoralize the base, a base that's very important to protect the Senate in 2016 and to win the White House in 2016. So the pressure is on now for the folks who won on those conservative issues to act on those conservative issues.
Well, as an example of that, we have a clip from Pat Roberts, senator in Kansas, who was really almost given up for political dead in his race. And I think he ignored the advice of the political consultant class here in Washington, and didn't run away from core value issues. He ran to them. And I think we have that clip. Let's play that clip.
Are you pro-life or pro-choice?
I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. You know, Justice Roberts, when he was in his confirmation hearing, referred to this issue as settled law.
Get past the rights of the unborn. Get past the guarantee of life for those at the end of life. I think that's unconscionable, Greg, I really do.
You know, a pretty amazing statement there where the Democrat candidate was saying, you know, we need to get past this issue of abortion in life. And Pat Roberts just said, get past it. He embraced these core value issues, did not run from them. And he, despite very difficult odds, is coming back to the United States Senate.
Well, I'll tell you, Tony, the Republican platform that many of us worked on that provided a path to victory not only in 2014, but does in 2016, we have to make sure that the integrity of that platform, you know, is held in place. Folks cannot now start to become tinkerers around the edges of that platform. That is the core that drives and energizes the base of American voters out there today.
Do you believe there's an expectation among voters that the Republicans will now do something with the majority that they've been given?
Well, that is what folks are waiting to see. And let's be clear. One of the things that lessons learned from last night is that we're in a play now that has no intermissions. We cannot take a breath. We cannot take a break. We must press the new Republican majority to be accountable and to be true to not only the people, but the ideas and the ideals that got them the victory last night. What's going to happen is that this is going to be driven by folks outside of the Beltway. We picked up a couple of Republican governors. We preserved the governorship of Brownback in Kansas, who was in trouble because he did the right thing. And we proved to folks that you can do the right thing, be tested, and survive and lead. That's what we have to do as we go forward in 2016.
Well, speaking of 2016, as the White House is in play, a number of these governors that had, as you mentioned, Sam Brownback, Scott Walker, another one, the field of potential Republican candidates could have expanded last night.
Well, I think so. And what's so important about the governors is that they are folks with executive experience. They have done things, they've managed, and they've led. What we can't not allow to happen is a new narrative to develop, which says that we were elected because of just pure competence. We don't want to be competent managers of big government. Right. We want to be effective leaders back to a path of constitutional governance, limited government, economic growth, and job creation. That's the job of us here in Washington. That's what FRC does so well in making sure that message is loud and clear.
I think you're absolutely right. Ken, thanks so much for being with us as always. Appreciate your perspectives. Well, folks, you've heard it. There is a lot of work to be done. Last night was a significant turn of events here in Washington, D.C., as the Republicans will now have control of the United States Senate. But the work just begins, and you are a key part of it. And I encourage you to stay connected to FRC and FRC Action, gaining the information that we have access to here in Washington, D.C., as to how you can hold both the Republicans and the Democrats accountable as they advance a positive pro-growth agenda that defends and advances faith, family, and freedom. Thanks so much for being with us for this special post-election analysis. And please stay tuned to FRC as we continue to keep you informed so that you might be engaged in moving America back to the right track. Thank you so much.